Tim Mackie is one of the co-founders of the Bible Project. Today, we talk with him about the Bible Project's origins and the importance of having high-quality tools to dig deep into God's Word. Welcome to inRoads, where we talk about the why of Appian Media and how you can use the technology of today to spread the timeless message of the Bible. Learn more about us and watch our free video series at appianmedia.org. During this week's episode, we're highlighting our recently released Lessons from the Land, the Gospels video series. It's a children's series that consists of 13 video lessons along with a workbook, and we'll have more on that later in the show. Well, Tim started the Bible Project with John Collins in 2014, and 6 years later, this nonprofit has produced over 150 animated videos about the Bible, and their YouTube channel just tipped the 2 million subscriber mark. Tim, welcome to inRoads.
Thank you. Yeah, good to talk with you guys.
So the first question I have for you, who is the bigger Bible nerd, you or John?
I think if you ask John, he would say that I am, though he's no chump. He has a strong interest in the Bible too.
So I've got to know, how did the two of you find each other? What made your paths cross and you decide to start this wild adventure?
Yeah, we actually met over 20 years ago in college. Here in Portland. So, and it was actually a ministry across the street from the college where we met. It was called Multnomah Bible College at the time. And then across the street, there was a church that had built a huge skateboard park warehouse in their back lot of their property. And it was an outreach ministry. And so that's actually where I met John, was at the skate park. And then we both ended up serving as staff at the skate park. And that's where we met. And we just kind of developed common friends and friendships. We were both interns and lived in this dirty house full of like 8 men for a summer. It was, it was called the intern house, and you can just imagine it. It was rundown house with eight
guys. Yeah,
sounds like a sitcom.
Yeah, 6 of them were like skateboard punks, and so anyway, that was the context of where we met. And then the women that we were dating at the time that would become our wives, they were good friends too, and so we've just kind of stayed connected over the years. Even though we haven't lived in the same city all those years, we've stayed in touch.
Yeah. So how did you guys, when you started this with John, how did all the Bible Project get started?
Well, so after college, I went off to go to school for far too long, like another dozen years, doing graduate work in biblical studies. And I loved it, loved every year of it. John, after college, went on to gain employable skills. And he did a year in pastoral ministry and kind of felt more called to do some kind of media storytelling. And so he got into documentary filmmaking, had his hand at doing editing, and then kind of was on the front edge of developing back in the mid-2000s, kind of the first wave of the short animated explainer video. YouTube was, still kind of new then. And so he just experimented. He had seen a couple, but he just started making them on his own, like rudimentary animation. And he loves to learn like nobody's business about new things and then distill it. And so he started making them on his own and then started a business that made short animated explainer videos. So when I moved back to Portland after finishing grad school, he was 5 years into a business animation studio company. And so he approached me because we had talked about Bible a lot over the years. And he approached me about the idea of making some of these videos. He already had a studio and animators and artists. And so that's his idea. He pitched the idea to me. And that was kind of how it started. It was just, let's do a little side project. Let's make a few videos about biblical theology or themes in the Bible and see what happens. And that's really how it began.
Yeah, and you guys have made a few videos.
Yeah, just a few.
So
Yeah.
you mentioned Portland, so your offices are there in Oregon. We were talking about this a little bit before the show, but you guys are in my old stomping grounds.
Yes,
and I think it's one of the many reasons I've been very interested to talk with you guys. Portland is a fun city. It's very eclectic, very different, but very creative. I feel like it's the right place for something like what you guys are doing to develop and grow like it has.
Yeah, it's interesting. I grew up here in Portland. I grew up blocks from our studio, which is also blocks from where I live now. The apple didn't fall far, it turns out. But so, the oddity of what Portland is, it's Portland. It's where I grew up. It feels normal. And so it's only after having moved away that I came to really appreciate the culture of the city, and really was excited to jump back into it when I moved back. So yeah, I agree. There's a really strong art and music scene. A big part of the local economy is creative, especially a lot of creative agency work in advertising and brand design and fashion. So it's just kind of in the air of the culture.
Yeah.
So most of the artists that have become a part of our team have been the friend of a friend, kind of mostly Portlanders. There's been very few people who have moved here to join our team. It's all kind of been people from the Portland area.
Yeah.
Which
so
has
let's
been
talk
fun.
about your team. I assume it's not just you and John anymore, based on the amount of content that you guys are churning out. How big is your team now?
Well, let's see. We turned 6 years old in May, and so real time. We're recording this in coronavirus era.
That's right.
So our last remote team meeting, I saw there were 42 participants.
Wow.
So that sounds about right. So, but we've got we have grown and are I hope maturing as an organization. So the animation studio is a big kind of heartbeat, and that's a team of about a dozen. But then we also have tens of thousands of monthly supporters. And so we have a whole team that just does customer engagement, interacting with our supporters. We have a big translation project to translate videos into other languages. That's a whole team. So it's kind of, the team isn't just now consisting of artists, but that is kind of the engine driving the whole thing.
Yeah. I know with Appian Media, when we started this project, it was kind of similar mindset of let's make it and give it away. And we looked at you guys a lot and what you were doing. And it gave us hope because we're like, okay, look, we can do a donation-based or a Kickstarter-based fundraiser and grow into something
It seemed
bigger.
less crazy.
It seemed less crazy.
when we looked at you.
That's right.
It's still crazy.
It's still crazy.
And I hope that you guys take that as a compliment. What you guys are doing is crazy, but it's a wonderful kind of crazy.
Yeah,
I get it. We feel the same way. It's been one big surprise.
Yeah.
We really thought this would just be a little passion project on the side. Turns out that more people than we thought would wanted to get behind what we were doing, and so it's been it's been the funnest thing I've ever done, to be quite honest.
That's awesome. So on that note, when you look back 6 years to the beginning of this, is this anything like what you envisioned it would be?
Oh, well, no, not in terms of I didn't have the imagination for it. I had spent, my entire 30s training to become a professor. And then it turns out that a full-time academic career wasn't quite what I was called to, more as this kind of bridge between scholarship and local church ministry. And so I was perfectly happy in local church, just being a Bible teacher. But this has kind of taken on a life of its own. And so John jumped on to do this full-time. He's kind of stepped out of that business that he had started and joined this full-time, I think about 3.5 years ago. And for me, it was about 3 years ago. So no, John's the entrepreneur. You're going to hear me say a lot of times that, oh, that was John's idea. Oh, that's all John. Because that's true. I'm just kind of like the nerd they keep in the corner, buried in my books. And but it's been a really fun partnership to just see what comes out of it.
So let's talk about the videos themselves. Your explainer videos are animated. When you guys started this, you mentioned that John had a background in animation and he was doing these explainer videos for clients.
Yeah.
Did you have a particular age group in mind? Because the funny thing about them is you look at it and you go, oh, this is a nice, cute video. I can show this to a junior high class, or maybe even my younger kids. But then you start to dig into it, like, whoa, this is really deep stuff. Like, what was the thought behind that?
Yeah, well, it's been pretty organic. Again, John's history of making these explainer videos. There's something about the medium of the explainer video, which kind of came into prominence again with the rise of YouTube, where if you could use normal language and you could pack and very clear, simple but creative visual illustration, you can somehow do something in about 5 minutes with that overlap of hearing somebody and watching the ideas. Something happens uniquely in being able to communicate something that's very different than listening to a lecture or reading a book. And so John had already kind of honed that craft. And so it's not for kids, but we didn't even really think about our audience was each other. John and I have been talking about the Bible and theology for our whole friendship, for decades. And so in a way, we were the audience because we were just trying to make sense of the Bible for ourselves. Yeah. And so that's kind of so we were 2 years in before we ever named who we imagined in our minds as somebody other than ourselves. Yeah. And it's somebody who's in the 18 to 35 range, who's a follower of Jesus, but really thoughtful and has so many questions about the Bible and about how this all makes any sense. And so that's kind of our ideal target. And what we find is when we aim there, we the age reach actually goes down and up from that.
Yes. Well, and I'll just say that where I worship, I've seen them used in classes as young as 5th and 6th graders, and they have the posters on the walls, and they have they're watching the videos. But then I've also seen them used where people in their 60s and 70s are watching them and going, "Oh man, this is amazing." So great range.
We've tried to say to ourselves, what is that thing that we're doing? And it's what I experience when I watch Pixar movies with my kids, which is they're having a blast with watching Toy Story, and I'm loving all of the double meanings and the allusions to other films, and it works on both levels to multiple audiences. And so we try and consciously do it, but I never want to kill the butterfly by dissecting it at the same time. But
well, I'll go off on a slight tangent here. You said something along the lines of your audience that you've identified are those that already believe but have a lot of questions. And I really do appreciate that you've not only recognized that those people exist, but it sounds like you've recognized that that's pretty much all of us. You're not going to meet a Christian who says, I got this Bible thing down. Like I've figured God out.
Yeah, sure.
We all have questions, and that's not a bad thing. It's not something to be afraid of or ashamed of. And what I really appreciate about your, especially the videos that summarize each book of the Bible, are those that take something that seems too big, that we've got all these questions, and you distill it down into something where maybe I don't get everything out of that the first time I watch it, but it starts to illuminate some things that maybe were unclear. And so...
Well, and on that note, I mean, I went digging on your YouTube channel to find some quotes from people, because I think it's always fascinating to see what people are saying. Things like, I became a Christian last year after decades of being an atheist, and this channel has helped me grow immensely. I just want to thank you all for how much you do for the Christian community. This channel has changed my life. I found you guys at the beginning of 2019, and honestly, I've grown 100-fold in terms of new knowledge I never had before. What do you think when you read comments like that about the work that you and your team have created? What comes to mind for you?
I often think they must be talking about some other YouTube channel. And what I mean is just like, I can't believe it. I just feel so blown away that something that I could get to work on could help somebody in that profound of a way. So just grateful. And really, John has been asking, his mom tells me, she's on our team. She
Awesome.
works here part-time. And she has told me for years that John has been asking questions about everything since he could talk. It's just who he is. And he is not satisfied with reductionistic or simplistic answers. And so he experienced growing up in the church many times where he wasn't safe and asking so many questions. He has a lot of memories of people telling him to just kind of like chill out. That's enough. I didn't have that kind of experience. I started following Jesus in my early 20s. And for me, it was just like it was like adopting a whole new way of seeing the world. And so somehow that friendship has just created something between our two life experiences that a lot of people are able to identify with and come learn along with us, because that's what we're doing. So I can't believe it, man. I'm really grateful to both get to do something I love, but then also hear these stories.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So to go back a little bit to the idea of your organization and how this got started and what it's grown into, in 2014, as you guys were creating your first 2 videos, it sounds like John, the entrepreneur here, was working a lot on this crowdfunding model of yours.
Yep.
So your all's model is to make everything free and raise money through donations. Why did you go that direction instead of creating paid content, putting it behind a paywall?
This is one of those it was John's idea moments, as with so many things with this project. But I think John had an important mentor in his life who really flipped his view of the world when it comes to the generosity as an expression of the kingdom of God. And it really comes out of the teachings of Jesus. It's just this idea of giving is where you find blessing more than taking and receiving. And that the kingdom of God is an economy of generosity. And so he's the one who first brought it up to me as a concept, not just as like an effective strategy, but as itself part of the thing we wanted to do, which was create something that could hopefully add value to the world, but do it through a different economic model that's telling a different kind of story. So that's one. The other thing is I feel like the Bible is already so challenging to understand that one of my goals as a teacher and explainer is trying to remove obstacles. And so if the paywall is an obstacle, I feel like Jesus is so beautiful and the story of the Bible is so amazing that it just made sense to make it available. So, I mean, I guess at some point I had to go buy a Bible at a bookstore, but it's just there to be had, and so that's kind of the philosophy behind it. So John did a lot of research on whether it could be a viable business model. And when we had to kind of raise some core money to make the first couple of videos, and people thought he was crazy, even some of his good friends. In fact, our executive director now who was the chairman of our board for many years, was kind of one of our first cheerleaders. He thought John was crazy. Like, these young bucks, how's this going to work? But I think John just had this hunch where if you create something where the content is the advertising,
Yep,
and where we will have a very quick idea of whether or not this has any value, adds any value to anybody, because we'll know if there's enough to raise money for the next video. And so what I've enjoyed too is it's just been a journey of just seeing what God is up to, because we can't ever predict. We can, with monthly supporters, we can create kind of models now and budget for things that we want to do. But even so, it's just, we have to remain open-handed even with the resources that we have. Mm-hmm. And for some people that'd be stressful, but I've learned that it's actually a pretty exciting place to be. Yeah, on a journey of faith. So I'm so grateful for John's conviction from day one to do things this way.
That is, yeah, it's very faith building. So let me ask you, the Bible Project. One thing I hear you guys say a lot, especially in those tags that you do at the end of videos, is that the Bible is one unified story that leads to Jesus. Do you think we as Westerners miss a lot of the subtleties that are in the text, like cultural or geographical subtleties, if we're just reading the Bible surface level and not really digging deeper into the Word?
Yes, is the short answer. I have a hard time being succinct sometimes, but our core kind of mission statement is that we're trying to help people experience the Bible as a unified story that leads to Jesus. And that's because one of the problems that we are trying to help resolve is that for many people, especially in the modern Western, especially Protestant church, the way people get introduced to the Bible and what you do with it is often builds up a set of assumptions or expectations that don't actually help people over the long haul relate to the Bible the way it's designed to be engaged with. And so whether that's being taught to read it as a set of inspirational kind of one-liners or verse quotes, or whether it's more of the behavior handbook. I go to the chapter and verse that tells me what God wants me to do, or it's like a theology dictionary. I know reading the Bible effectively is learning what page the answer to my question is on. And so what we're after is that these biblical authors have their own goals and a message they want to tell us, that's something we haven't perhaps thought to hear before. But to hear it, we need to learn to read and understand along the lines of communication that they designed. And the biblical authors lived 2,000 years ago plus, speaking and writing in other languages and other cultures. And it's that culture gap that I think makes it hard to learn the skill set that the biblical authors just assume that you have. So that's a lot of what we're after in the videos, is how the biblical authors conceive of these texts as all connected and the modes of communication that they use.
Yeah. Right. One of the common things that we'll say, we create video documentaries. We travel to the places and try to show you and help you imagine what the culture was like. Mm-hmm. We're trying to give the readers of this inspired text at least as much information as the original recipients had. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when Jesus talks about, the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, his audience knew what that meant. Right. His audience understood that was a dangerous place, and they had a picture of that in their mind. Yeah. Yes. Trying to give Westerners the right imagery and the right understanding. This was a culture very different than ours, in a land that in some ways is similar and in some ways is very different. Right. Yeah. And so what you guys do is trying to bring us back up to speed, right? To where the original recipients already were. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a part of God and his wisdom and mysterious purpose, has chosen to address his people of all places and all times, but through the medium of these texts that come from one place and one set of times. And so But this is not all that different than what I had to do when I got married to my wife, Jessica. She's another culture. And I'm a foreign land to her in terms of how I think. And so it's loving your neighbor as yourself. It's learning to open myself up to how another person writes and thinks and communicates. And in a way, that's the opportunity before us in the Bible, is this cross-cultural experience to genuinely listen to what these authors have to say. And I think what God is trying to tell us through these authors, which means we got to check our assumptions at the door and learn to listen in new ways. So I'm with you. I think reconnecting people to the context of the Bible and the culture and language, it's such a fun learning experience.
Yes, indeed.
It is. I heard somebody once say it's like an onion. You just keep peeling back layers, and no matter how old you might get and think you know the Bible, there's still something new that you're going to learn. Context is huge. So well, coming up after the break, we'll talk with Tim about a new project that the Bible Project is taking on called Classroom. Free online graduate level courses about the Bible. Okay, so let's talk about Lessons from the Land, the Gospels for a minute. It's now available on our website, and you can watch all the videos completely free.
Yeah, that's right. They are great for Family Devo. I've used them myself with my own kids. Homeschool groups who might be considering looking for something about history and geography, or a church Bible class or small group. So there's everything from lessons on the Sea of Galilee and the type of boat Jesus and his disciples might have used, to an oil lamp and how they used those, how they lit those, and the lessons that Jesus uses with that illustration. It's all really, really good stuff. Yeah,
and there's a fantastic workbook to go along with the videos with great activities, discussion prompts, and QR codes that link to each video. You can find the videos and the workbooks on our website, appianmedia.org. Now, back to the show. We're talking with Tim Mackie from the Bible Project, and Tim has been working on a new project called Classroom, and it's very different than the animated videos that you guys have been creating previously. So what exactly is Classroom?
Yeah, well, it is exactly what it sounds like.
Pretty self-explanatory.
That's helpful. That's helpful to people like me. Yeah.
I've taught as an adjunct professor at a couple different seminaries, and I have loved the experience of creating the videos, because every video is distilling anywhere from 5 to 20 hours of conversation that John and I have. And it's like a class. I just am taking him through what I would do for a whole class. But I just love the classroom setting personally, because for me, it's also a learning environment where you are, you're taking people through the biblical text, reading it, discussing it, Bible open. But then also it's a place to test drive ideas and things I'm processing in real time, and then the questions of the students. So I just think the classroom's unreplaceable. And so we just thought, well, what if we were to dream up a way to integrate that into the project, and then eventually make it so that it's not just like classes that I teach, but then it could be a venue for other Bible teachers as well. So that's essentially what we did. So we started hosting live classes, small classes, and we intentionally make everybody at the table representing a totally different kind of demographic within the kingdom of God. And we pick a book of the Bible, and then we just go. I'm like a tour guide, and then I just facilitate the conversation and point cool stuff out along the way. So then we have a whole team that's creating an online learning version of that experience, and there you go. So we're in beta version right now. We have, let's see, well, we have one class up right now, but we have 6 that are already kind of in the bank and being edited and produced. And I think in January 2021, it'll go officially live with about 4 classes. And then we just want to invite professors in and create a whole seminary level kind of educational opportunity that's free online.
Yeah. You talk about removing barriers.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. I mean, that is an opportunity that is not going to be made available to your average student.
Yeah, the online learning world is in a lot of both upheaval and innovation right now. And I'm not really an expert in it. We have some smart people on our team who are thinking all that through. But for me, it was actually a pretty basic intuition. Every seminary class I ever taught was made up of a small group of people who had the money and time to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And while I enjoyed it and do enjoy it, I just always had this deep sense of like, it shouldn't just be the people who get to be here, that we get to explore the book of Isaiah, for 10 hours together. Anybody should be able to do this if they want. So it was kind of born out of that, where and it's the same thing as the videos. It's just the Bible is public domain. And
that's right.
If you can just get people into how it works and the story it's telling, amazing things can happen. And so that's kind of the heart behind the classroom's next level Bible engagement.
So with that, how important do you feel like it is for people to get deep into their Bible on a daily basis? I mean, and I think about from the standpoint of other world religions, they immerse their children, whether it's the Jewish culture in the Hebrew Bible or even Muslims in the Quran, like they immerse them. And sometimes I feel like in Christianity, I can only speak for myself, but like we hand our kids a coloring page and we say, here you go, here's the story of Jonah. And it's
sure.
I mean, how important is it that we are in the Bible on a daily basis, digging deep into it?
Well, it's important to get a long-range historical perspective, I think, when we are thinking about that question. So, we live post-printing press. We half a millennium, with the printing press, and with translations of the Bible in our own vernacular. So that's only been with the Christian movement for 1/4 of its 2,000-year history. For the 3/4 of that history, most people didn't read the Bible. They heard it. Or they heard it taught, and then they had memorized, and then they would hear it in their prayers or see it displayed in art and so on. So I actually personally do think that having a regular rhythm of reading and meditating, even memorizing the scriptures, is a really important, and it's just exponentially valuable habit. But at the same time, I don't want to limit what the Bible can be and do to someone who has their own copy and spends hours studying it every day, because most Christians haven't done that for most of his church history. They encounter the Bible as a communal text in worship. That's how most people encountered the Bible for most of church history, is hearing it. And so there you go. That's one perspective. Another perspective is the communities in which Jesus was raised, and in Jewish tradition, the Hebrew Bible actually is aware of itself and has a whole poem dedicated to describing its ideal reader. We call it Psalm 1. And Psalm 1 tells us that this is a collection of texts that requires a lifetime of pondering and meditation, and that unless you have a rhythm of doing that, which in the poem is called day and night, that there's going to remain all kinds of important truths just laying there waiting to be discovered that you won't access if you don't put in the time. It's a kind of literature that's designed to not give up its message quickly. It requires a lifetime of reading and rereading, which I've come to see is really beautiful, because it means that understanding won't come quickly. It's kind of like any healthy relationship you have with somebody, a friendship. But so that's my non-succinct answer to that question. I do think daily habits, or at least regular habits, are important, but there are also many ways to encounter the Bible than just reading it by yourself that are also important alongside that.
Yeah, and I think that speaks not only to, Stu's question was geared towards the recipient of the message and how they should consume that, whether they should read it on a daily basis, but it also puts a large responsibility on those willing to teach so that they can be the ones that others can hear it from.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Because that may be their only encounter with it. So it's a powerful responsibility, and I'm sure you all take that very seriously, as anyone who presents the Bible should.
Yeah.
No,
it's terrifying.
it is, and it should be, right?
Yeah, right.
The scriptures do say, "Let not many of you become teachers."
Right. But really,
serious
my experience with the Bible has been life-changing, and
yes,
really, it's more just I want to invite people to see and experience some of the things that have been life-changing for me, and that's really kind of personally one of the main engines driving it for me.
Yeah.
And so when I think about the larger stakes, it kind of freaks me out. So it's good for me to think about them, but not too often.
So what does this do to Christianity with your classroom offering to have a growing number of people willing to think deep, to meditate on things like the Hebrew Bible, the original languages written, Hebrew and Greek, and what do you think that does for Christianity going forward to have more and more people like this willing to invest that effort?
Well, it's not unlike what I think one of the basic functions of a local church community is. The story that Jesus saw himself bringing to its fulfillment and then inviting his followers into, it's a story that invites you to see the reality in a new way, to see yourself and your identity in a new way, to see other people in a new way, and then to not just as a set of ideas, but as a set of lived practices in a community that's following Jesus together and living by the Sermon on the Mount, as you try and embody the love and the message of Jesus. And so there at least needs to be some group of people who are thinking through what is the story really about, and what is it that Jesus was really inviting us into, so that we can make sure we're faithfully embodying and representing that in all these different cultural contexts that the church finds itself in. So that, for me, is the real end game, is that any church community needs some Bible nerds in its midst. Not everybody has to be a Bible nerd, but every church community needs some Bible nerds to make sure that the way that they're representing Jesus stays grounded in what the story of the Bible actually is. And so that's my dream and hope for it, is just that it can, and we can make a contribution to the body of Christ that helps people love God and love their neighbors themselves. And there you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what's next for the Bible Project? Obviously, some more explainer videos. Sounds like Classroom's going to continue to grow. You guys were experimenting with some VR. What's coming down the pipeline for you guys?
This is one of those. This is John's project. John was an early adopter. He's a technology early adopter. He's constantly reading and listening and learning what's out there and what's next. And so he's pretty convinced that somewhere in the next 5 to 7 years is how YouTube revolutionized digital communication. And not just that, what YouTube represented to the early 2000s. He's convinced there's another wave of that coming that's related in some way to either VR, virtual reality, or AR, augmented reality, where you put on glasses and you can still see, but you're interacting with your own environment in an augmented way. So he's just trying to stay on the front end of that. And so it's not that overnight our whole project and library will become irrelevant one day, but he's trying to think about what's that next technological medium, and when it arrives, that we're already starting to develop content for it. Christians through history have actually been at the forefront of media technology, whether it's the invention of the book, the codex, right, or the printing press. And so I think John's has a strong conviction that we need to have followers of Jesus at the forefront of what's going to happen inevitably in the next few years here with virtual reality. So that's that project. It's pretty cool.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah. And to hear that you all have a desire for Christians to lead that charge, that's inspiring, as it should.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, totally.
Right.
Yeah. So I think around classroom, we'll probably start to maybe own our identity a little bit more as an educational media company. And so we get a lot of requests from churches or schools asking if there's, a curriculum or books or workbooks and stuff like that. And we've kind of been hesitant to do that because publishing is not we don't really know much about it. We haven't really done much of it. So, but I can see that being an extension in the next few years too. But so we'll just kind of see. We're just kind of taking each season as it comes and just trying to do the next, right thing.
Yeah. So one final question, and I'm sure you all get these types of questions through YouTube and maybe through email. What kind of advice would you give to someone who's wanting to start making content like yours, something to help people understand the Bible? These up and coming filmmakers or artists or animators. What kind of advice would you give to them?
Man, that's a great question. The Bible is the kind of text that was created with such brilliant craftsmanship and care. And it was rooted in a culture that valued art and poetry and story as one of the main ways to reach into the human heart and soul. And so it's hard to ever, explain Shakespeare, explain Macbeth. So you can't ever create something that replaces what it is. However, every generation needs its own set of explainers to connect us to the brilliance of what Shakespeare was doing. And so the same with the Bible. But nothing can replace the individual creative being overwhelmed with the beauty and the message of the Bible. And when the Bible gets a hold of you and the story that it's telling, you can't keep it in. It, by the nature of what it's about, will force you to want to share it with others. And so whatever set of resources or tools that can help you learn about the culture, language, history, message of the Bible to create that vital live connection, I think is the most important resource a Bible teacher needs. Because the moment that the Bible becomes a product, or a project, even though we're called the Bible Project, but you know what I'm saying? The moment it becomes an artifact, and it's my job to just like take A and turn it into B, we're killing it. We're killing it. But if it can remain a vital live source of connection between me and God, and sharing it just is the only natural thing to do, it becomes one of the most exciting things to do. So I'm not actually answering in a very helpful way, maybe, but it's more kind of the core issue. I've just met so many Bible teachers who, they get in one form or another, who get into a career of teaching, and I don't know, it just kind of becomes old hat to them, and it's just sad to me, because the Bible is the kind of book that takes many human lifetimes to really wrap your mind around. And so for even just one person's teaching career or something, or creative career, there's more than enough there to churn a heart and a mind. So anyway, that's my first thought when you ask the question.
No, that's great. And we've kind of always thought that we want to create tools not to replace the Bible, but to bring more understanding and, like you said, more context to the Scripture.
That's right.
And we're just so thankful that you guys are doing what you're doing. Tim, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And keep up the good work.
Yeah, thanks so much. Good to talk with you guys.
So inRoads is a production of Appian Media. We're a nonprofit video production company that's 100% crowd-funded. If you're interested in learning more about how you can support Appian Media so we can continue to create more great free content, visit us at appianmedia.org. That's it for Season 2 of the podcast. We look forward to having a lot more great conversations with creators using their talents to help spread the gospel. If you have guest suggestions, we encourage you to reach out to us through one of our social media channels or our website. And if you enjoy this content, we don't ask this very often on the podcast. We probably should, but if you enjoy this content, we would encourage you to, write a review, give us some stars. I don't know how that works. Exactly.
There's stars.
There's stars
is a thing.
involved.
Yep.
Exactly. Just it helps us raise the level of awareness for this podcast. So, in the meantime, make use of some of the great digital tools that are available to encourage you in your study of God's Word.